All right, folks, it is the afternoon before Christmas Eve or the morning before Christmas Eve. And of course, Christmas is tomorrow. And of course, a lot of things are going on in the world. So let's see what all of these things that are taking place in the world. And we'll be reporting on those. By the way, we do have Black Santa here at Hayti. So a lot of things are going on in that space. So a lot of kids will be coming in, greeting him, and get ready to get their Christmas wishes in and all along those lines. But spreading famine threatens hundreds of thousands of lives in Sudan, a panel has warned. So Sudan's war is deepening and widening a famine crisis, hunger monitoring report says. So Global Hunger Monitor says famine in war-torn Sudan is spreading. So that is something that we're hearing in the news as well. And five men are sentenced for their involvement in an Amsterdam soccer riot. So five men found guilty over Amsterdam football violence over there in that area of the world. So Dutch court issues prison sentences over violence against Israeli soccer fans. And Dutch court hands Amsterdam Jew hunt attackers prison term topping out at 6 months. And Bethlehem is set to mark a second subdued Christmas during the war in Gaza. So empty streets and closed shops mark a somber Christmas Eve in Bethlehem. So Christians in Gaza, huddled in church, celebrate Christmas. We're still here, they say. And looting cripples food supply in Gaza as Israel neglects pledges to tackle gangs, as sources are saying in that place. Only 3% of UN emergency food aid is getting to desperate Gazians. So gangs loot UN aid troops, wreaking further havoc in Gaza during the war, according to one of the reports that's coming out of that area. And inside a secret Ukrainian drone command post is something that NPR is reporting, where Russian soldiers are seen as prey. And definitely that's something going on as well. And Pope Francis launches Jubilee, bringing pilgrims and grumbling to Rome. As Rome prepares for a tourist surge, residents fear losing the city's souls. So Jubilee, a new pedestrian area, opens near the Vatican, and a trip to Italy in 2025 might not be the brightest idea, is what they're saying in the Economic Times. And a 50,000-year-old baby mammoth carcass is discovered in Siberia. Discovery of a 50,000-year-old baby mammoth is a big boon to researchers, as definitely the baby mammoth preserved for 50,000 years, unveiled in Russia's Siberia. So that's something else going on in the space of the world and all along those lines. Russian cargo ship sinks in the Mediterranean after an engine room explosion, Moscow says. So, Russian cargo ship linked to Syrian arms deliveries sinks in the Mediterranean. So, that's something else that is being reported as well. So, Russian cargo ship sinks in the Mediterranean after explosion, Russian Foreign Ministry says. So, Russian cargo ship sinks in the Mediterranean after the explosion in the engine room. And Ismail Haniyeh, Israel confirms it killed Hamas leader in Tehran. Israel vows to start targeting Houthi leaders, ratcheting up threat after missile fire. So Israel acknowledges it assassinated Hamas chief Haniyeh for the first time. And Europe's far right papers over the extreme views of German market attack suspect. So tears dominate Germany's Magdeburg after the Christmas market attack. Magdeburg attack fuels disinformation and mistrust in German leaders. And in Syria, UN investigative team says Syria's new authorities are very receptive to a probe of Assad. So that's something else we're seeing in the news as well. And tears dominate Germany's Magdeburg after that Christmas market attack. And that's something else that is being reported as well. UN investigative team says Syria's new authorities very receptive to that probe of Assad. So we'll see how this all plays out as well. And an opposition party vows to immediately take steps to impeach Han in South Korea. South Korea opposition considered moving to impeach acting president, and South Korean opposition seeks to impeach that acting president Han. And we'll see what goes on in the Asian theater with that particular situation as well. And Christians protest in the Syrian capital after the burning of a Christmas tree. So hundreds protest in Syria after a Christmas tree was set alight. Hundreds protest in Christian area of Syrian capital after the Christmas tree was burned, and that's something going on in the Middle East as well. So definitely that's going on. And trauma lingers on for survivors of the deadly 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. So if we die together 20 years after the Boxing Day tsunami. Are we better prepared? Is what The Guardian was reporting on. And Aceh hopeful as Indonesia beefs up warning system 20 years after the tsunami. So definitely the scars of a 9.1 earthquake and tsunami continue to haunt Indians for decades. And Cop Grill Allah Arjan with unexpected questions. So a crowd of fans, broken metal gates, and all in that space. So if he believes he's a bigger star, Anna Malley slams Telegani CM reference ready over the Ali Arjan case. So that's just some of the world news. I did see that I've got Nick with me, so I'll bring Nick in and make sure that we can hear me and everything. So how's it going, Nick?
It's going good.
Good.
So we got some world action going on.
We have world action. There was a lot of world action going on, even on Christmas Day and Christmas Eve. And I was talking about some of it. I can get to some others, but yeah, we got stuff going on in Gaza. We got stuff going on in uh, the UN investigating Syrian authorities, and we've got stuff going on in the U.S. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on because apparently a Santa Cruz wharf collapsed doing a repair project, and three were rescued, and that took place yesterday. So they had Christmas Eve weather, and it wasn't good weather. So West Coast storms caused Santa Cruz Pier to collapse, as it looks like the East Coast is getting snow, but not here in Durham, North Carolina, but I think further up and everything. And some people are wondering about those Joe Biden um, pardons because they're asking whether he can undo them because they're 37 out of 40, and there's even some families that are upset at these pardons and everything. So we'll see if Trump gets to undo them or if he has to stick with them. So I'm not sure how pardons work if you can ever undo them. And Biden signed an 895 billion defense bill despite transgender care provisions. So he just signed a big bill that's 895 billion. And I know oftentimes on our shows, including Economics Monday, you talked about the runaway spending, but Senate passes the
Yeah.
defense bill that will raise the troop pay and aims to counter China's power. So I guess we're going to raise the pay of the soldiers.
Yeah, but unfortunately, they lie all the time on what they actually are doing up there in Washington, D.C. And that's part of the problem. In other words, the Inflation Reduction Act created inflation. The Social Security Fairness Act is unfair in a lot of respects and fair in some other respects. So, I mean, that's one of the problems we have right now in D.C. is that they should put "In God We Trust," but you can't trust us. That should be the rest of the motto, Mark. In God you trust, but you can't trust us. We're Congress, and it's a really bad day in America when you can't trust your leaders because they just lie all the time, and then they're lying about the financial situation in the United States. It's horrible. The only question is when's it going to implode?
Well,
You know,
I got a question for you because I brought it up yesterday, but he's been teasing it and he's going even after Sasha's place of Canada and everything. But is he just teasing? Because I know back in the early days of Pod TV, when it was IBM TV, you used to joke about wanting to take over the media airwaves and everything. And it looks like Trump is teasing U.S. expansion into Panama, Greenland, and Canada. So is he actually just joking, or is he actually going to try to get these various countries? Because I think Russia might even have something to do with Greenland, but is he going to actually try to get Canada, Greenland, and Panama Canal?
well, Canada is going to be the rough part because we've tried to get Canada for a long time. Greenland, here's the reality. Denmark can't defend Greenland if we want it. I mean, and frankly, do we really want Greenland? Becomes another thing. And then Panama, we used to have Panama.
Mhm.
So, but my thoughts are if the countries are working, leave them alone. If they're not, we have to invade them like Afghanistan. And then they ask us to leave. Our answer should have been no. I mean, the thing is, forget it. And so we'll see what happens, in his administration, how much of how you say, an expansionist he is when it comes to U.S. foreign policy. So that just remains to be seen. But at the same time, we're going to have to get our financial situation in order. I know Harris isn't the right person to do it, but I don't think Trump is either. By the way, Elon Musk and Ramaswamy might be. So delegate it to somebody who can actually do the job. He doesn't have problems firing a bunch of people that are just collecting government paychecks. But this guy, Joe Biden, is definitely not the solution. I mean,
Well, he's already out the door, and who knows what
he
his
can't find a
future will be.
dollar he doesn't want to spend. I mean, really, Joe, 200 billion more, Joe. Come on, Joe.
He just doesn't
And
think
same
like
with Congress.
he,
By the way, Congress all folded because they can't vote. They can't vote against Social Security and expect to maintain their seat. Okay, and so they are also complicit in this big lie that Social Security is actually funded properly because it isn't. And by the way, neither is Medicare. You know, so and they're
that
not
makes
dealing with
sense.
either one of these problems.
Well, it looks like Biden has vetoed a once bipartisan effort to add 66 federal judgeships because I think he was saying that it was going to be too hurried and everything. So Biden vetoed a bill that would give Trump more judicial seats to fill. So it looks like he vetoed that. So maybe there won't be as many seats since he vetoed that notion. And I guess didn't want those to go toward Trump and everything. And there was some sad news out of Lake Tahoe because there was some people that died after they, when that died, got hurt after their chairlift collision. So I thought that those chairlifts were relatively safe, but I guess that they can collide just like anything else can collide.
Yeah, they can. Now, here's something interesting happens now. The only people who know this are business people that own their own business. There's another government institution called FinCEN, which is the Financial Crimes Network, and you have to file if you own a small business by the end of the year to let everybody know who the ultimate beneficial owner of your company is. So if Rick or Mark, and you might have one, you may have Lee Productions, okay? And Lee Productions, if you filed it as a corporation or a partnership or an entity, you have to file with the federal government to let them know that you're the owner of that company. If not, they start fining you like $500 a day starting January 1st. I'm serious. This is big in all the small businesses because all of a sudden, we're under attack. The reason is they want to know who really owns the business. Is it you, or is it some Chinese guy who's making you a puppet? So it does have some rationale. Now, here's what happened to give you an idea how exciting this is. So a federal district court in Texas this month declared it to be unconstitutional for the whole country. Okay. And so letting everybody know you don't have to file it, right? Then what happened like 2 days ago, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals overturned it and said, you're wrong. You do have to file it. Now January 1st is the due date. Then what happens is FinCEN said, because of the confusion, we're extended like to the 31st. Now, who does it affect? All the small business owners. They're being jerked around like this. That. So I just completed a CLE course on FinCEN because, you got to take, because it's they deal with anti-money laundering, bank secrecy, all this other stuff. How many cases did FinCEN file in court in a year? What's their average filing? How about on the high end, 47? That's it in a year. That's it. Now they collect sometimes.
They caught 47 companies money laundering, basically.
Yeah, that's it. But they did collect anywhere from 20 million to 1.9 billion. You're either money laundering or violating the Bank Secrecy Act, et cetera. But what it does, Rick, it sends all the small businesses into a flurry as to, we got to get this thing filed. Now, I filed it for all our companies. We've had this discussion in our.
It should be like a one-page form, really.
I mean, no, it's several pages. You can go on the internet, and if you own a small company, a lot like you have.
I did have a production company for a while. It was called Stinky Boy Productions, and the logo was a little guy with stink lines coming off his head.
This sounds like a great title and everything. Hey, just really quickly.
It's actually pretty easy to file on the website. One thing I give them credit for, the federal government, in this case, they get a lot of credit. They made the website pretty easy to file it. There's no fees. They made it easy. You could actually find your corporation. I mean, I have to give them credit. Their code guys did a great job making it easy to file on FinCEN. But I can also tell you, since I work with a lot of small businesses, how many are just not even aware, even though this has been around They've been
Yeah, a lot of
screaming.
people aren't aware. A lot of people don't have business plans, and a lot
Yeah.
of people don't have things that they need. We were talking
Yeah.
to the gentleman from London about that
They'll
yesterday.
get a letter in January, February, or something saying.
Well, see, we don't know. This is see. Also, when they have laws, it's not just they pass a law and they have a fine. It's an operation. How are they actually going to proceed, Rick? Okay, let's say they caught Mark Lee. Lee Productions didn't file, and they're going to fine Mark $500 a day for 30 days. You owe us $15,000, and Mark's going, I didn't even know about this. Either you pay or you go bankrupt. See, this is an operation. They don't have to do that. They could say, well, I can see you didn't know about it, et cetera, and we're going to go ahead and have you file, and everything's cool because we know you're not doing anything illegal. See, and this is the problem with the federal government. They have the good news is they should have that leeway. The bad news, my experience with some of the federal government employees, they don't operate that way. They get on power trips. Well, that's the law. You violated the law.
Well, if we're going to bitch about this, let's bitch.
15,000, and Mark's going like, where am I supposed to get 15,000 from?
Well, let's bitch about the law. Let me complain about the state of California. My wife had a small business, and just to keep it open, even if it was doing no business, you have to pay the state of California $800 a year, the franchise tax board.
Well, franchise tax, right?
And I don't know if other states do that, but like for a few years, like she was taking a break from the business, but just to keep the business name, in her name, and it was $800 for nothing.
Right. Yeah. It's a franchise tax. I mean, and a lot of it, that's what.
Yeah. Say, Nick, speaking of franchise taxes and everything like that, there is a major fund that was getting forgiven, but now it looks like it's not going to be forgiven. Maybe Trump, when he comes in, will forgive it again. But apparently, and we've talked about it on this network before, the Biden administration had these massive student loan forgiveness plans, but on Friday they walked away from 2 of them. So they marked a anticlimactic end, according to Forbes, to the efforts to enact broad student debt relief. So they withdrew the proposed regulation that would have allowed the initiatives to be implemented. So it looks like they were.
Every time he tried it, the courts overturned it. So
okay, yeah, and if you know the history of this, see, this is very important. This is again Congress not coming clean with the facts. Here's the history of student loans. For years, when I went to school, most people didn't get student loans. The reason why, they were dischargeable in bankruptcy. So if a bank lent you money or some moron lent you money and you weren't able to pay it back because you didn't get the job you thought you were because you majored in art and it just didn't work out, then you file bankruptcy and you get rid of the student loans. That was the law all the way until the Bankruptcy Abuse and Consumer Protection Act of 2005. And then in 2005, they changed the law. And this was the law change. Your student loans are not dischargeable in bankruptcy, creating a whole industry of predatory lending that has existed from 2005 till the present. Who was behind this Bankruptcy Abuse and Consumer Protection Act? It was the Republicans. In other words, this was the Bush administration. They need to eat this one. Unfortunately, who's eating it? It's the stupid students that have been led into accumulating huge student loans for that. Now, so from that standpoint, it is totally inequitable. And from that standpoint, the truth needs to be told. And the thing is, this was a Republican machine that did this to start lending, predatory lending. And all they had to do is keep the Bankruptcy Act open, and we wouldn't have been in this situation today. Now what happened, apparently, according to David Walker, after the banks started lending, they sold their debt to the federal government. Now the federal government is stuck with $1.7 trillion in student loans that are non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. Now, I've never had a case, but here would be my case before the U.S. Supreme Court. Okay, if I could ever get it there, if I ever had a client on that. Okay, is that considered indentured servitude? In other words, a person has $250,000 or whatever in student loans, and they can't ever possibly pay it back. Now, from what I also understand, that if you're so far in it, that they will discharge the loans. So, this is this is a really horrible situation that has evolved. And frankly, the educational institutions are behind it, because the thing is, it generated a lot of money for the educational institutions. The people that should have protected these 18-year-olds were behind it. In other words, they were complicit. And in a certain respect, I'm guilty of it, because I was an adjunct professor for the graduate tax program at Northeastern University in Boston for 12 years. Now, I can tell you what I made. I didn't make very much, $11,000 a year. That doesn't sound very much. You know how many times I had to appear in front of the students? 5 times. That's it. Okay. So now let's do an hour for an hour. Now do the calculation. How much was I making per hour?
$2,200 an hour.
Very good. Right. So, and I'm going like, ooh, that's pretty good. So my hourly rate was pretty good. And so I was going like, if I'm getting paid that, who's paying it? Who's getting it on the other side? It's the Northeastern University students. In other words, and by the way, there's like a firewall. I have no idea who's on scholarship, who's not, who's paying full boat, who's in debt. I have no idea of that. But somebody's paying the boat, and sometimes the boat is as high as $30,000 to $60,000 a year to go through the program. And this is the problem. And it's like, if you're on the educational side like me, I should just keep my mouth shut. But Northeastern doesn't have the program anymore, so I don't really care. But how much of this goes on in the United States of America, with these kids going to private institutions, getting ramrodded by their educational institution that should be there to protect them, the banks who are out there for them. In other words, everybody's, and they're just, I hate to say it, a dumb 18-year-old who now has the right to contract, and had no financial education in high school, and no good counselors. The counselors are going, well, you should really go, Mark Lee, you should really go to Marquette. It's a good school. You go to University of Miami, it's a great school. And that makes them feel good that they sent their kids to some private school that they can't afford. Now, when I was teaching chess, I was coaching kids not to go to those schools. Unfortunately, one guy who was a good chess player didn't listen to me. He went to Carnegie Mellon. He racked up $40,000 in student loans and then withdrew from school. I don't like that. So what has he got out of his education? $40,000 in debt. That was it. And I knew his family. They couldn't afford that wreck. It was just absolutely horrible. But his dream, have you ever been to these? You went to UC Boulder. I mean, I went to University of Denver.
Well, but UC Boulder was $1,500 a year when I went there in the 80s. No, and it's a state school, but you're paying to make the schools much more deluxe, to build big new buildings.
Oh yeah. I taught law school for a year at Campbell University.
Yeah, and I went to Campbell. Hey, Nick, what was the name of your cousin that was the attorney general?
Pardon?
So what was the name of your cousin that was the attorney general?
Yeah, my cousin Bill Saxby was the attorney general.
Saxby, that's what I was trying to remember, because I did see another attorney general story, but it was somebody else and everything, but I couldn't remember if they were related.
He was the AG, and he was a big mouth like me under Nixon and Ford, and he survived.
Well, speaking of AGs, I had a question for. Speaking of AGs, I had a question for Rick.
Before you move on, let me just give my favorite example of collegiate excess. Louisiana State University, LSU.
Yes, LSU.
Built a thing called the Lazy River, and it is a giant moving swimming pool in the shape of the letters LSU, and you get in an inner tube, and you just float down the L into the S into the U. On a Thursday afternoon with your beverage, that thing probably cost what, $300,000 or more to
at least.
And so, and that's part of your school facilities.
It's not just schools. I was watching the Green Bay game, and they were having people that were doing tubing and other things that was outside of the Green Bay Stadium and everything. And I'm sure that the city of Green Bay put a lot of money into that attraction, for lack of a better term, because there were people that were not in the game and they were outside enjoying winter sports. And I know that could not have been a cheap activity based on.
All right, but the city of Green Bay is owns the team. It's the one team that's publicly
Sure.
owned by the citizens of that town, which is not a big town. And a pro sports team, especially a legendary sports team like that, is probably worth 70, 80 billion dollars. So that's
Yeah, and to me that's legitimate. If the city owns the team and the city builds the facilities, I don't have a problem with it. Well, I do have a problem, and Jacoby's not here, so I can't yell at him.
But I guess what
I
I'm
have a
asking
problem.
is, but that's what I was talking about is there's snow tubing near Lambeau Field. So they literally showed people that were getting ready for this thrill ride snow tubing going on. And I'm thinking that that's not by the city. That's probably a private person. And apparently,
I'm way off. The Green Bay Packers are only worth $6 billion.
Right.
Yeah, well, that to me is a good investment because the city actually owns the team.
they
What I
own the
hate-
team. But what
I
about
hate
those?
it when the government says this is your investment and you don't own anything. And the federal government does it all the time. They go, "We're going to invest 11 billion in the Silicon market space." No, they're not. They're not investing anything. They're going to give away 11 billion and tell us it's an investment. That is a bold-faced lie. And unfortunately, they're not accountable except the press, which is your organization, Mark, should be yelling at them for lying to us when they say investment and it isn't. Or they say, well, our government is to provide a service. And a service means that we go in debt, aka the US Post Office.
Oh, so wait,
They don't
this
need
is
to do that.
snow tubing. This is, you're not in the water freezing your ass off. This is a hill where you
Right.
get on an inner tube and you sled down the hill.
Right.
And you got to pay. It's not for free.
No,
Yeah, but it's probably owned by a private industry.
and that's what it's
It's
saying.
probably owned by
And you can
a-
either do tubing or skating because they also have skating, and
Okay.
the skating and tubing combo goes for 150. Tubing by itself for a season pass is $50 or something like that, and they have different rates as well. But yeah, it's definitely.
Since we're broadcasting on LinkedIn, because I watch LinkedIn all the time, a couple of interesting things. One, I put a Pod TV poll on LinkedIn relating to the RFK. Should he be nominated?
Mhm.
Here was the thing. I thought people on LinkedIn, because they're pretty smart, would say no. Guess what? 70% said yes, he should be affirmed by the Senate. I fell out of my chair. I was going like, whoa, you guys are for it. Okay, so I put another poll. Should we put tariffs on China? 80% said yes, we should put tariffs on China. So let you know that there's a good chance. If it was Bill Clinton follows polls and then he just does what it polls
Well,
says.
speaking
I
of
don't know
Bill
about
Clinton,
Donald.
but speaking of Bill
Good-
Clinton,
good.
Bill Clinton is
Plans
actually
to
not
see
feeling well. He was
Tariffs on
hospitalized.
China and JFK, head of the Health and Human Resources. The problem with JFK, head of Health and Human Resources, the wrong guy for the job.
So
And then we know that
I wish Trump would follow more polls because he tends to appeal to his base, but his base is only 30% of America. If he went with 70% of America, governed as a centrist, we'd be a lot better off.
yeah, and the thing is, but it's interesting because I watched Clinton for a long time, and he was a real smart guy, probably the smartest president I ever had, and he followed the polls.
He
I mean,
triangulated. He looked at where the
Yep.
voters were, and he moved towards the
Yes.
voters, and that
Yes.
led to a lot of good stuff. It led to some bad stuff too. It led
Yeah, right,
to
right.
super
But the
calling,
thing is-
calling criminals super predators and locking up a ton of people for way too long. But it also led to welfare reform and balancing the budget.
Impressive what you just said. Can you imagine Bill Clinton was the last person to balance the budget?
You know, speaking of
Something
balance, speaking of
The last
balancing
two
budget, Nick,
administrations
we have some
have not been
shocking
able
news
to
from
do
the IRS. The IRS has announced today that 1 million taxpayers will get up to $1,400 in rebate. So that's a lot of money coming to individuals.
Yeah.
So that's 1 million taxpayers that'll get up to $1,400 in rebates in next year. So the IRS just announced that. So I guess that's from the returns of last year, but they said that a lot of folks are going to get these rebates in 2025. So I don't know how far 1,400 will go and all along those lines. But I did have something outside of that I was going to bring to both you and Rick's attention because we talk about it a lot on this show and everything, which is this notion of literacy. And apparently there was a new study that came out today. It was reported in The Hill that U.S. children are struggling with reading, and so are adults. So learning to read can become potentially more difficult for older students and adults who have fallen behind, creating grave concerns as to the number of individuals struggling with literacy in the high school and adulthood is increasing. So they released a new studies that shows K through 12 schools are seeing more older students who cannot read at their grade level, coupled with an international study showing an increase in U.S. adults who cannot read past simple sentences.
All right, so you got a couple things pushing that. One is COVID. As you know, liberals are saying, you know, that it was good to have the lockdowns, but actually, you know, I got to admit that the COVID lockdowns, while I think they were helpful and fewer people getting sick and dying, they did cause educational deficits and delays.
This has been going on
That's
for a
on the
while.
one thing. On another thing is, you know, social media, AI, the way we communicate now, where you just hit a button and your message is sent, and you didn't even write the message, is eroding people's ability to write well and to read.
Mhm.
And you know,
Yeah.
I've lost much of my ability to plow through a book. I used to read many books a week, or a few books a week. Now I'm lucky to get through a book a month.
Well,
Yeah,
and that's part of what they said. ETS, which is actually a company that was associated with Measurement, which is, as y'all know, a company that I have worked with and everything. But they released a study along with the Advanced Education Research and Development Fund showing that more than 20% of students in 5th through 7th grade stumble over words they can't recognize or sound out. So experts aim to have children reading proficiently at their own level by 3rd grade. So that's 1 out of 5 that can't.
That'll get worse because AI, when you hit a button, or you just talk into your phone and AI writes an essay for you. 500 words takes 2 seconds, literally.
Yeah.
2 seconds.
And you will become more lazy because of AI. That's for
there
sure,
was an article, somebody
just
sat down to interview somebody who just graduated from some Ivy League university to interview him for a job. And the person, according to the article, could not recall some fairly simple words because that person had been leaning on AI for their whole college career, or the last half of their college career. But yeah, like I can't when am I going to sit down with a book? If I sit down with a book for 2 hours, I'll miss 2 hours of people. Somebody might say something on Twitter, or my wife and I have like 200 channels to stream through. We might miss like the latest Kate Blanchett movie.
Yeah, I mean, you do have a good point. In other words, you have a lot of different types of media that you want to absorb. So the thing is, reading used to be it, but the real question is, how much value does it really have? I know it appears on PISA scores today. Obviously, ETS out of Princeton, New Jersey, highly pushes it, et cetera, et cetera. But on a going forward basis, is it how much is that going? How much value is that going to have with the emergence of technology? So are we worshiping a metric that's going away, which is unfortunately
ETS, they have the SAT, and the most dreaded part of the SAT is the reading comprehension section, where they give you a chunk of copy, like 500 words, and you have to read a little essay. And then you have to answer questions about what the author of the essay was trying to get across to you.
Right. And the thing, and they do that with every one of the tests because ETS dominates the testing. The GMAT is an ETS test.
The
LSAT, ETS. I took all these crazy, stupid tests, and they're all generated from Princeton, New Jersey.
Right.
Okay. With that, what people don't know is just like you can game IQ tests, you can game chess,
yeah,
you can game SATs. So I told my son, I said, look, if you want to go to Duke, which he did, I said, you got to game the SAT. What do you mean by that? I said, you know how you play video games all the time? Yeah. I studied. You got to do that same thing for the SAT for a year. He did it for a year. And all he did is read all the stupid books and stuff like that. He scored a 1585 on his GRE and got full scholarship to Duke.
There you go. The deal is that the key to that's exactly right. My kid hired me to tutor. She wanted to be a national merit scholar.
Yeah, and MSGC.
Sure. So she hired me to tutor her. All I did was I went online, I found practice tests.
Right.
She took 80 practice PSATs and SATs until she fired me for just being way too. But You have to take dozens and dozens of practice tests.
Dozens, exactly.
And so,
Right.
so when you take the real thing then
for real, it's like basketball. If you want to be good at basketball, you got to make zillions of shots beyond any form of normality. And like chess, I was 3-time state champion, but people don't realize how many games I reviewed. I was insane about reading chess books and more chess books and tournaments and tours, blah, 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 blah. And so because I did that, by the time I was high school, I was like ranked 10th in the country. The person next to me didn't do that. So I'd sit down and I'd just slaughter them. They were going like, "How did you do? It was so good."
It's like so when you take the SAT for real, you've seen every kind of question.
All the permutations and combinations.
You gotta do what to do and everything. But Rick and Nick, just in that same space and everything along those lines, American Airlines on actually this morning, because we can say the merits of technology, but they can also have some demerits as well, because apparently American Airlines briefly grounded all of its U.S. flights on Tuesday morning, that should be this morning, on the morning before Christmas Eve, because of an unspecified technical problem. So they haven't even figured out what the technical problem is, but it did cause a bunch of flights.
On one of the busiest travel days of the year.
Wow, I didn't hear about that, but that is unbelievably horrible.
But can we finish up the previous topic? The deal is that if you have AI doing your writing for you, you probably start to suffer from logic and reasoning blindness. If AI is doing your thinking for you, you're going to lose. Like when I go on Twitter, a lot of the comments, somebody makes a tweet, and then there are comments and a lot of the tweets responding to it have missed the point of the tweet because people have lost the thread. And like my wife got me Sirius FM satellite radio, and I listened to stand-up comedy in the car. That's all I listen to. And it's my one break from social media and politics and stand-up routines are just like reading comp problems on the SAT. You have a thesis. What is it about airline food? That's your thesis. That's Jerry Seinfeld. What is it these days about this? And then he goes through and he gives examples, and then he draws conclusions, which are the jokes. And you need to be able to follow a train of thought. And I feel like the more AI we have, the less people will be able to follow a chain of reasoning.
It makes sense. We'll see how the AI plays. But speaking of AI, apparently there's even folks that are, this is the day and the days that we'll be celebrating Christmas and all along those lines. But you've even got some folks, because MSN is reporting it, that are trying to even question the existence of the Most Holy and everything. So apparently there's some folks that are saying whether this was actually a true historical event or whether it was some mythology and all along those lines.
Well, are we talking the birth of Jesus or the nativity?
Yes, the whole nine yards.
People have always questioned the details of Jesus's story. I guess somebody needed to fill like a few inches on an online newspaper to say, people are still questioning the accuracy of reports on a thing that happened 2,000 years ago.
Exactly. And apparently they were trying to tie it to a controversial Jewish rabbi named Yasha ben Jeshua, who apparently gathered a following in his life and teachings, provided the seed that they say grew into Christianity. So there's some folks that are having different arguments as to whether.
Right. You look at the historical origins of Christmas. It's like there before there was Christmas, there were winter festivals, because winter sucks. It's dark, it's cold, and people get bummed out. So all our most food and our booziest, our eat good food, family gathers, all our most comforting holidays are in the middle of winter, so we feel better. So historically, you could argue that Jesus was not born on December 25th. He was born in a completely different part of the year, but the Christians, the early Christians, decided to graft Jesus's birth onto the winter festivals because it's a good time to celebrate.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And like I said, there's even some questions about that gentleman that I mentioned earlier as to whether he even existed and everything, meaning that whatever the name I said, there was the Jewish gentleman and
Well,
everything.
the Jews have a holiday called Passover, celebrating our escape from bondage
Mhm.
in Egypt, where we supposedly were in bondage building the pyramids. And then Moses came along and he fought with the Pharaoh, and God was on his side and sent plagues, and the Pharaoh's like, all right, no more, I can't deal with these plagues, you're free. And then the sea parts, the whole deal. And there's some question, and more than a question, as to whether the Jews were ever enslaved in Egypt 3,000 years ago or 2,500, whatever it was. So yeah, all these things that happened thousands of years ago, there's plenty of questions.
Yep, and like I said, nobody was here doing that, or nobody here was there during that time. So it remains a mystery that will probably always remain a mystery until you make it to the other side and all along those lines. But yeah, there's definitely folks that will have stories and aren't. I mean, how many religions are there? There are new religions that are constantly popping up and everything along those lines. Because I mean, I think the religion that Nick belonged to, I think, is one of the more modern ones, but there are modern ones that are even more modern than that and everything.
Well, Scientology is kind of a religion,
right, and that's a new religion.
I worked in an office on Hollywood Boulevard for a dozen years, and Scientology, for being a really small religion, owns a ton of real estate.
Mhm.
They own more than a dozen buildings in Hollywood.
Yep.
And so if you walk down the street, or walk down Hollywood Boulevard, which I wouldn't, tourists do it. And I always feel sorry for them because Hollywood Boulevard is not that great. It's got the stars in the pavement. But if you walk down Hollywood Boulevard, odds are that somebody from Scientology will ask you if you want to take a short test, a short quiz to help you improve your life. So,
wow.
if you say yes, which I've done because I was bored, they walk you into an office and they sit you and they give you an abridged version of, I think, the MMPI, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. And it asks a bunch of questions about your beliefs and behaviors. And then they take it back and they score it and they bring you back a little report. And it shows a graph saying, well, you're good here and you're bad here and you're good here. But if you let us help you, we can make you good across the board. And that's how you get recruited into Scientology.
Speaking of Scientology and things like that, the Democrats apparently are still in trouble. So the Democrats around the country are still licking their wounds after the election defeat and everything. And new research from progressive polling outfit Navigator Research shows the party's reputation is in tatters, even among previous backers who have come to view the Dems as weak, obsessed with woke initiatives such as DEI, and overly accommodating to the elites at the expense of the middle class. They're not a friend of the working class anymore, a respondent wrote. Navigator at one point asked participants to compare the Democratic Party to an animal. I think it's the donkey that's supposed to be the animal that they are and everything, but one likened them to an ostrich because they've got their heads in the sand and are absolutely
committed. So, okay, some of that's legit. Some of, like the whole Biden thing, like Joe Biden is looking pretty and acting pretty old, but we're gonna just ignore that and hide it and keep him from doing interviews. There seems to be some substance to those accusations. Mm-hmm. Then some of it is the Republicans hanging a ton of stuff on the Dems and the Dems not objecting loudly enough, like the whole trans thing. So, like,
I was actually going to ask about the trans thing because there was a suit. That's actually when I was asking Nick about his relative, because I couldn't remember if Paxton was his relative or not. But Texas Supreme Court apparently, or is got a sued the NCAA to block the participation of transgender athletes in women's sports, arguing that it tricks and misleads fans. And I know a whole bunch of athletes, I think from San Diego State, just transferred out because of the trans athlete that was playing for their team, and apparently
On the
they let their
volleyball team, I think. They
on
had
the volleyball team, right?
So I mean, I think it's a controversy built around like half a dozen prominent, very visible trans athletes. Like this one trans athlete
Right.
is somebody who used to be a guy, has decided that they're a woman, and is what, 6'1". And it's like,
Right.
well, you can't have a 6'1", lady man, smacking the ball at women. They might get hurt. But the deal is, if you look at the team, like there are like half a dozen women on that team who are 6'2" or taller, and who probably outweigh the trans woman. And it's like, yeah, well, what about this 6'3", 175-pound woman who was born with a vagina, so she's definitely a woman, no controversy, who's smacking the ball in your face? Like the trans woman is no, every team, every decent college volleyball team has a bunch of women over 6 feet tall and over 160 pounds, just as big or bigger and just as strong as the trans athlete. And it's a bunch of bullshit. But the deal is that it's not the Dems who are pushing trans. It's trans people who want to be part of public life. And then the Dems say, well, we got to figure out how to accommodate them. And then the Republicans say, oh, well, you're pushing a trans agenda when you're trying to figure out which bathroom they should use. And the Dems never strongly enough said, this is a bullshit issue. It's not that big a deal. We're only talking about a few dozen at most athletes. And, the Dems were not loud enough in calling bullshit on the Republicans.
Yep, they definitely didn't do that and everything. By the way, you love the other animal that they were compared to, because I guess when they were asking the ostriches, one that they compared the Democrats to, the other one was koalas, because apparently those marsupials are complacent and lazy, and they were saying that's what the
Obama's campaign team seemed to be pretty good, but that was what now 12 years ago, and then the Biden campaign team seemed to suck ass. And a lot of Harris's campaign team, I think, was Biden's campaign team.
I think so.
But I mean, if I had a time machine and I could boss the Democrats around in 2016, I'd say, frickin' Joe Biden, you run for president. Hillary, run for VP. Joe, I know you're sad because your son Bo just died. But get over your sads, because if you don't run, then Trump becomes president. So then you have Biden run in 2016. He's 8 years, he's 82 now. He would have been 74. He would have looked, relatively fine, and then all the controversy around Hillary is blunted because she's only running for VP. So the whole email thing. So then Biden becomes president. Maybe he runs again in 2020. Maybe he resigns halfway through his term and lets Hillary be president. And then, we get to hold Democrats get to hold the White House for another at least 4 years and maybe 8 years. But, we don't have a time machine, and I'm not the boss.
We don't have a time machine, but apparently, speaking of time machine, immigrants are preparing action plans after Trump says he's going to allow ICE to act in school, churches, and other institutions. So I'm not sure how this is going to work, but he did say he's going to allow them to act in school, churches, and hospitals. So I guess they can go into those.
So that means that they're especially in states with democratic governance, there are sanctuary cities and there are sanctuary buildings, right. Churches. I guess I don't know about hospitals. I know that certain churches are designated by the individual pastors who, run the individual churches, saying, yeah, you can take sanctuary here, and we're not going to let ICE in. And now Trump is saying, yeah, good luck with that.
He said that he will enforce it, and ICE will be able to just walk in there and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to see what plays in that space. What would you? This is a slightly different story, but if you found out that there was a FedEx driver or any driver that was delivering stuff during the holiday seasons, and they decided to, for other reasons, that they wanted to be the Grinch and dump the holiday packages in the woods, which apparently is what a FedEx person did and everything, what should their punishment be? Because apparently they dumped a whole bunch of holiday packages in the woods. So I guess they were doing their version of playing the Grinch.
Well, I mean, they get fired. That's the deal. I mean, everybody has Ring cameras now. So you see, now, so the conditions for delivery drivers are not great. You know, they need to find places to pee. So sometimes they'll get caught peeing in some place. And in fact, I'm going to have to run away in just a second. We've got 8 minutes to go, but my coffee is not going to let me stay for 8 more minutes.
Well, apparently, I know you got to run, but we've got 8 minutes. But apparently, he was busted because he wanted to avoid working late, and to come to your point, because he says that he dumped dozens of packages in the woods to avoid working late. So I guess he was feeling that the hours were not that great and everything. So they arrested him in after a post office in Bonifay, Florida, received several reports.
I'm sorry. I'll try to be back, but I got to go. Otherwise, there's going to be a problem here.
Don't have a problem. Go do that and everything, and hopefully you'll be back before we wrap up. But yeah, they said that he's had done that and everything along those lines. So that was what was going on, and apparently it was workman things that were going on that he did not feel he was getting a adequate support. So that's why he decided to dump those and all along those lines. Let's see if I can get to some other world news that I did not get to, and then we'll see if Rick makes it back as we end and everything along those lines. Looks like somebody is saying that World War III has already begun. Jamie Dimon Warren saying his team is preparing for a serious conflict with China and Russia, and there are definitely some assets that he wants protected and everything. And a NASA spacecraft just plunged into the sun and broke stunning records, according to Mashable. So definitely we'll see what goes on in that space. And the Tennessee population, which is not far from here in North Carolina, is continuing to grow. So that population is growing and all in that space. So definitely that's just some of the things going on in the world side. I did mention that I think that former President Clinton had been hospitalized, so we'll see how that goes and everything. So I do know that had happened recently, so I did see that in the news that had been reported. And J.D. Vance appears to defend Germany's far-right AfD party at a event that he was at, and all in that space. So definitely there's a lot going on in that way as well. Of course, people are still talking about the drones as well. So definitely the drones is a major conversation, and Nick's back too. So we'll see as we get ready to wrap up. But apparently the drones are a major conversation, and Tom Hanks has sparked health concerns after a shaky Saturday Night Live appearance. So we got Tom Hanks not feeling that well, and we've got Bill Clinton not feeling that well. So definitely got some.
I thought he did fine on SNL, but my wife was saying he looks pretty. Everybody looks old. I mean,
yeah, that's the problem when people get older. They start looking old. They had a shoot for all the people that were in Welcome Back, Kotter. And the sad part, they were all in their 60s, except they were all dead. In other words, they didn't make it to 70. They're all dead, except John Travolta. It's like everybody else in Welcome Back, Kotter is all dead. So it's a very unfortunate thing. And that's what's also happening in the United States. We're seeing the aging of America. Trump's going to be what? The oldest president ever?
The oldest president ever to take office. And so
yeah.
If he lasts all 4 years, he'll be the oldest president ever. But Biden is 82, Trump's 78 and change. So he'll be, so Biden will leave office at 82, but Trump will, I think, leave office at 82 and a half or something.
Yeah, something like that. They're pretty close to the same. But also people tend to age differently. Some people age without much of a problem, and some people age very rapidly. So
Well,
it's
yeah,
not
you
like
compare Biden,
uniform.
like Biden would have won re-election if he looked like Tom Selleck. Tom Selleck, just about the same age as Biden. Harrison Ford, just
Yeah.
about the same age. They've kept their hair. They've kept a kind of a youthful face. They've kept a youthful gait. I mean,
Right.
freaking Tom Selleck was playing, I think, the head of the NYPD on Blue Bloods, right?
Yeah, Blue Blood.
Yeah.
And like you could never, in real life, you could never have the head of the NYPD being 78 years old. But Tom Selleck looks good enough in his late 70s that, yeah,
Right.
he's somewhat believable.
Yeah, the sad part is Joe Biden just didn't age well. Frankly, there's nothing he can do about it. So, he looks old.
Well, I think they should have shot him full of steroids.
It could be. We really don't know what happened.
But on the other hand, do you want a president who's like chock full of steroids?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the problems that we're seeing in the Social Security system is baby boomers turning age 65 at 10,000 a day. And so what happens is that more and more people are getting on Social Security rolls at a huge number. And the Social Security Trust Fund is just not designed to support it. It was never actuarially sound when FDR invented it. It was a pay-as-you-go system. They call them PAYGOs. Okay? PAYGOs means you're relying, it's almost like a Ponzi scheme. You're relying on the next generation.
As long as the population is growing, you have more young people entering the workforce to pay for the old people. And as long as the old people die at a healthy clip or unhealthy clip, speaking of
that and wrapping up and everything, Nick, I don't know if you knew this, but I just looked up this because it was in the news and all along those lines. But there is a major thing that is part of Christmas that is actually quite old and has been out there for a while. And apparently it was published for the first time anonymously on December 23rd, which would have been yesterday, 1823. So that would make it 201 years old. So twas the night before Christmas. That poem was originally published in the Sentinel, a newspaper based in Troy, New York. So an instant success. The poem was republished several times in different publications and Christmas books throughout the years. But Clement Clark Moore did not accept authorship until 1837. So born into a prominent, wealthy New York family, his father was a bishop and the president of Columbia College. Moore had initially kept it a secret because he considered the poem to be of less scholarly merit. So he wrote the poem. Apparently, Moore allegedly wrote the Christmas poem on December 24th, 1822, while running errands in Greenwich Village on a sleigh operated by a plump Dutchman with a beard, incorporating images of St. Nicholas as a jolly gift-giving patron saint of children. He then shared these rhyming couplets to entertain his young kids that evening. So that song is very old and has been around forever and a day. So definitely, but apparently it has some controversy too. So the holiday classic isn't without controversy. There is some debate as to who actually wrote the poem. Some scholars credit Major Henry Livingston Jr., a distant relative of Clement Clark Moore's wife, as the true author of the classic. So regardless of who you believe wrote "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," its impact on Christmas as a global phenomenon is undeniable. The poem is credited with popularizing the mainstream version of Santa Claus, from his merry physical description and the delightful names of his flying reindeer to the idea of holiday gift giving as we now know it. So it looks like
and then they changed him completely because St. Nicholas was really a dark-skinned Middle Easterner, and Coca-Cola made him a big fat white guy. And so the thing is,
well, same with Jesus. Jesus was not a blonde dude with long flowing locks.
No kidding. National Geographic had his picture what they think he really looked like, which was a dark-skinned guy. I mean, he was not.
And probably with bad skin, because at the time, like, I think most people had recovered from smallpox. And so.
Right. So the media can do wonders in changing the way history really is and make it the way they want it to be. And it isn't. So again, it's just more fraud.
Like you said, on that note, both Biden and Trump, who we've both mentioned, are seen in different ways by society and everything. And who knows, they may be seen totally differently some 100 years from now. So he may be seen as some of the greatest people of all time some 100 years from now. And who knows, maybe our descendants will have this argument on Pod TV as to who was the greatest and all along those lines. But we'll find out at a much later time. But the attitudes can change even through the course of time.
Right. In the meantime, I guess we have to get out of here, right? Because
We do.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
All right.
Very good.
Merry
And
Christmas.
also Hanukkah, I think, starts on the same night as Christmas this year.
Right.
Yeah, and
All right. So happy Hanukkah, and then a week later you get Kwanzaa. So happy.
Yeah, Kwanzaa.
All
Right.
right.
Kwanzaa actually starts the day after Christmas, literally the day after.
Right.
We'll have a Kwanzaa celebration here and everything. So we'll have World Politics later today. We won't have World Edition tomorrow, and we might not have World Edition on Thursday, but we will be back on Friday.
All right.
Okay.
See you then.
We'll see you then. Bye-bye.